To help my childhood sweetheart, the Crown Prince, ascend the throne, I married the Imperial Preceptor. The Imperial Preceptor, named Zhu Yi, was a descendant of the serpent god, cold-blooded and driven by desire. I refused to consummate the marriage, causing him to suffer the backlash of the marital vow, spitting blood day after day. Later, I was poisoned to death by the Crown Prince. Zhu Yi sacrificed himself to bring me back to life. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the night of my wedding with Zhu Yi. Zhu Yi turned away dejectedly after being rejected, but I urgently pulled him back and kissed him. Later, I lay contentedly in Zhu Yi's arms, toying with his fingers. Grand Preceptor, support me as the Empress, and become my consort. How about that? Hello, everyone, welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful stories every day. Now, the story begins. After my death, my soul was bound to the mortal realm by Zhu Yi. As Zhu Yi carried my corpse, step by step towards the altar, I drifted right beside him. Tears of blood streamed from my eyes as I wept and begged him not to sacrifice himself for me. It wasn't worth it, yet he seemed completely unaware. The man who always stood with a straight back was now kneeling before the altar, bowing down in devout prayer. May my life be exchanged for my wife's rebirth in another lifetime. Divine punishment struck mercilessly, and he was torn to pieces. But all I saw were blossoms of blood blooming, beautiful to the extreme. Fearing to frighten me, Zhu Yi, even in death, did not forget to shield my vision. Only his voice reached my ears, poignant and moving. May Mingjiao be forever joyful and without end. I suddenly opened my eyes, my back drenched in cold sweat. My heart was beating so fast it felt almost suffocating. Zhu Yi, I instinctively called out that name. The next second, my neck was grabbed. I said, I won't save the Crown Prince. Princess Mingjiao, do you like the Crown Prince that much? On our wedding night, you refused to share a bed with me, yet for him, you're willing to beg me again and again. Facing Zhu Yi's reddened eyes, I was completely jolted awake. Zhu Yi's sacrifice had succeeded. I had returned to 10 years ago. Today, I am to marry Zhu Yi. Yet, the Crown Prince drank himself into a stupor at the mansion and stabbed himself with a sword. National Preceptor Zhu Yi is a descendant of the serpent god, a semi-immortal capable of reviving the dead. I begged Zhu Yi to save the Crown Prince, but after a fierce argument, he stormed off in anger. From then on, though we were called husband and wife, Zhu Yi and I slept in separate rooms. At this moment, gazing at Zhu Yi, who was still alive and well, my eyes instantly welled up with tears. Seeing this, Zhu Yi's eyelashes trembled sharply, and he immediately withdrew his hand. He seemed at a loss. Does your neck hurt? I didn't use much force. I shook my head, my voice choked up. I'm sorry, Zhu Yi. Zhu Yi lifted my chin, carefully examining my neck. Seeing that there wasn't even a red mark, he hardened his heart once more. He gazed at me, his eyes filled with sorrow. Mingjiao, you need not apologize to me, nor try to soften my heart. Not taking the initiative to kill the Crown Prince is the greatest mercy I can offer, and it is only for your sake. I know you care for the Crown Prince. But you have married me and signed the marriage contract. If you refuse to consummate our marriage, I will. He paused at this point, as if too embarrassed to continue, and said no more. Snakes are inherently lustful, and once a descendant of the serpent god forms a marriage contract with a human, they must engage in intimate relations daily, or else suffer the backlash. In my past life, I only learned of this later. By then, Zhu Yi's health had already become very weak. Seeing Zhu Yi rise to leave, I quickly reached out and grabbed him. I don't like the Crown Prince, I like you. Zhu Yi paused, turning his head to look at me. He seemed moved, but soon his expression fell into melancholy. Mingjiao, all along, whatever you said, I believed it. But tonight, even if you say you love me, I won't save the Crown Prince. As he spoke, he lowered his gaze, hiding the sorrow that was about to overflow. I won't stop you anymore. If you want to go see the Crown Prince, go ahead. A moment of spring night is worth a fortune. Why would I see some Crown Prince? Should I stab him again and send him to the afterlife as our wedding gift? I grew a bit impatient, sat up, and threw myself into Zhu Yi's embrace. Then, before he could even react, I flipped over and pinned him down on the bed. Zhu Yi was startled by my movement, yet his hand instinctively protected my head, afraid I might bump against the bed. Mingjiao, you. Before he could finish his words, I kissed his lips. His words were tough, but his body was honest, instinctively responding to me. Half a minute later, he finally remembered to push me away, only for me to grab his hand. The moment our fingers interlocked, he seemed to lose all his strength. He stopped resisting, letting me have my way. I smiled, lying on top of him. My free hand lifted his clothes. My fingers wandered aimlessly over his abdominal muscles. Chuyi's body grew hotter, and his breathing became more and more enticing. I was utterly captivated, my fingers unconsciously drifting downward. Then, I was startled. The snake has too. My hands were burning hot, caught in a dilemma. Suddenly, Chuyi grabbed my hand. His eyes brimmed with springtime warmth, his ears flushed red as if about to drip blood. Just as I thought he was about to do something further, the next second, a gust of wind came, and my whole body froze, unable to move. Chuyi used magic to immobilize me, then wrapped me tightly in a quilt, and then he ran away on his own. Me, in the study, Chuyi didn't light the lamp, his entire figure sinking into the shadows, yet his face still felt burning hot. He took a deep breath, pointing a finger at the character pasted on the window from a distance. The next second, the character for double happiness split vertically down the middle, transforming into two little paper figures that could talk, and floated onto the desk. Chuyi propped his chin on his hand and asked the little paper figures very seriously, "Why is Mingjiao suddenly so enthusiastic toward me?" His voice was strained, as if he were both embarrassed and humbled to the core. The two paper figures spoke with piercing words. "Why do you care why she's so warm? Even if it's all an act, would you really stop liking her? If I were you, I'd take advantage of her willingness to be intimate and use your body to keep her. Make her crave the taste and lose herself in it. Her heart belongs to the crown prince, but her body is with you. At least you've got one thing, be content with that." Chuyi expressionlessly reached out and crumpled both little paper figures. The two little paper figures looked down at their crumpled selves, overcome with sorrow. "We're all wrinkled, so ugly, QAQ, can't bear to touch her, so you come to bully us, is that it? I'm going to tell Princess Mingjiao that you're not some noble and upright state preceptor at all, you're just a wicked." Before the little paper figure could utter the word snake, Chuyi waved his hand and withdrew the spiritual energy he had imbued in the two paper figures, picking up the window paper cut that had reverted to the character for double happiness. Chuyi walked to the window and pasted it back in place. Raising my eyes, I paused in my movements. Under the distant flowering tree, a young woman in wedding attire stood gracefully. The moonlight shone upon her, accentuating her snow-white skin and flower-like beauty, making her all the more delicate and captivating. But before the young woman, someone was kneeling, quite out of place. That is the Imperial Secret Guard. The Emperor is increasingly favoring the third prince and the consort. The Empress is being suppressed in the rear palace, and the Crown Prince is struggling in the Imperial Court. Now that the Crown Prince's life hangs in the balance for you, the Empress, upon hearing this terrible news, has been left half dead. I implore the princess to quickly summon the state preceptor to save him. The voice was carried to her ears by the wind, and Chuyi's face darkened. The fingers gripping the window tightened abruptly. In an instant, the wooden window shattered into splinters. Only the paper-cut decoration remained intact, yet it too fell to the ground, dusted with ash. The immobilization spell Chuyi cast on me lasted only 5 short minutes. After the spell was lifted, there wasn't even the slightest tingling sensation left on my body. I gathered the quilt around me and sat up, gritting my teeth, then couldn't help but laugh. Someone who truly loves you will consider every little detail for your sake. Even if you've stirred his heart into disarray, he still loves you instinctively. I got dressed and got out of bed to find Chuyi. If we don't consummate the marriage soon, this man is going to cough up blood. However, just as I stepped into the corridor, someone knelt down before me with a swish. Before the shadow guard had even finished speaking, I felt the air around me grow several degrees colder. Instinctively, I looked up and saw Chuyi standing by the study window in the distance. Wait. Where is the carved window? I was momentarily distracted, and the shadow guard followed my gaze. When he saw Chuyi, his body trembled slightly. Chuyi met my gaze, directly passed through the wall, and strode toward me. His figure flickered in and out of view under the moonlight, and in a few breaths, he stood before me, truly worthy of being a descendant of the serpent god. I marveled. How could such immense power not inspire envy and longing? In my previous life, I was ambitious, even scheming to seize Zhu Yi's divine power, but he was too good, so, when it was within my grasp, I held back. Then, in a confrontation with the Crown Prince, I lost my life. In this life, my ambition remains unchanged. I want even more, but as for Zhu Yi, I only want him. No, the snake. I withdrew my gaze and looked at the kneeling shadow guard on the ground. The shadow guard, already dazed, stood up under Zhu Yi's control, flew out of the state preceptor's residence, and then fell outside the courtyard wall. My expression remained unchanged as I looked at Zhu Yi. Zhu Yi's delicate and beautiful features were hidden in the night shadows beneath the trees outside the corridor. His expression was indistinct, yet his presence was so strong it was impossible to ignore. Zhu Yi probably always thought of me as pure and kind, a lotus blooming from the mud, thinking he could scare me into staying by his side forever, but he didn't know, my heart is black. The more dangerous he acts now, the more aroused I become. Zhu Yi looked at me. Don't you have anything to say, Mingjiao? His voice was icy cold, as if covered in a layer of frost, but I wasn't the least bit afraid. Those who are favored always act without fear. It's also easy to become arrogant from being spoiled. I laughed and pushed Zhu Yi against the tree. Of course I have something to say. Under Zhu Yi's astonished gaze, I kissed his lips. I like you, Zhu Yi. I won't save the Crown Prince. I'll save you. I took a bite of Zhu Yi's Adam's apple and whispered softly in his ear. I want to share the clouds and rain of Mount Wu with you, a night of passion and intimacy. The next day, waking up, the sun was already high in the sky. The body had been carefully cleaned, feeling very refreshed, but the waist ached, the hands ached, the legs ached, everything ached. My throat was especially parched. My mind was still a bit hazy as I sat up, half opening my eyes. Just as I was about to look for some water, a cup of floral tea was handed to my lips. The temperature was just right, neither too cold nor too hot. I suddenly opened my eyes and met Zhu Yi's overly beautiful gaze. His eyes held a smile, along with a hint of unspoken shyness. I couldn't help but laugh, my gaze sweeping over Zhu Yi's slightly reddened earlobes. Then I lowered my eyes and drank the entire cup of tea from Zhu Yi's hand. My throat felt soothed, and my whole body felt much better. Zhu Yi set the teacup aside, and only then did I notice he was merely draped in a simple outer robe. His long hair was disheveled, his neck covered in love bites, his back marked with several scratches, and his shoulders and collarbone bearing teeth marks. The memories of last night's passionate and decadent moments surged back like a tide. Crazy, but it's a perfect match, addictive. Under my undisguised gaze, Zhu Yi soon blushed more than just his ears. He leaned in close to me, covering my eyes with his hand, and only then asked, "Why do you keep looking at me?" I deliberately blinked, letting my long lashes brush against his palm, satisfied to feel him pause for a moment. I then said leisurely, "You look good." Zhu Yi didn't move his hand away, and asked again, somewhat incoherently, "Last night, I waited for a while, but he didn't continue. It's clear what is finding so hard to ask about, to be honest. Zhu Yi's performance last night far exceeded my expectations. I had thought that between a human and a snake, that aspect would be difficult to harmonize. I never expected it to be so comfortable, so exhilarating. Perhaps it was because he obediently used only one. In any case, it left one craving for more. I pulled down Kanya's hand covering my eyes and pressed my lips to his. Again, he and Zhu Yi spent several days together without any sense of shame. The Crown Prince sent someone to deliver an invitation. Just like in the previous life, the Crown Prince wouldn't die even without Zhu Yi's rescue. The imperial physicians of the Imperial Medical Institute, bound by the fate of their 9 clans, were never just for show. The Crown Prince, dragging his barely alive, ailing body, still wants to hold a grand birthday banquet. In the study, Zhu Yi was sitting right beside me. Seeing the content on the invitation, he couldn't help but let out a light scoff. I laughed, finding even his sarcastic tone endearing. I was just about to decline the invitation when I suddenly remembered something. The messenger hadn't left yet, so I had someone call him over and questioned him from behind the screen. "Who will be attending the Crown Prince's birthday banquet?" The visitor listed a series of names. All people I had been familiar with during my youth when I spent time with the Crown Prince. I couldn't help but interrupt him and get straight to the point. Is General Zhong's legitimate daughter not going? This birthday banquet, for the Empress, should be an opportunity in another sense to evaluate noble daughters from prominent families for the Crown Prince. The person delivering the invitation was taken aback, clearly surprised that I would suddenly ask about Zhong Lingyu. After all, in his view, Zhong Lingyu and I have never had any interaction, at least until this point in time. We had never met before. Zhong Lingyu had been living in the northern desert with her parents and only returned to the capital at the beginning of the year. His Highness the Crown Prince has already sent an invitation to General Zhong's residence. I suppose in a few days, Miss Zhong will also attend the banquet. As the person spoke, they paused, glanced at Zhu Yi, then looked at me. His Highness the Crown Prince had no choice but to invite Miss Zhong to the banquet. I hope you won't take it to heart. His Highness holds you in high regard. Before this single-minded, loyal servant could finish his tactless remark, a gust of fierce wind swept him up and flung him away. I turned to Zhuye. Zhuye's face was as dark as stormy waters. I soothingly hooked Zhuye's hand. Help me hypnotize him. Make him forget the conversation I just had with him. Zhuye was like an exceptionally easy-to-soothe cat, instantly pacified by my stroking. He didn't ask me the reason for doing this either, concentrating a beam of light at his fingertip and pointing it at the person lying on the ground outside. I thought of Zhong Lingyu and added, then have him reply to the Crown Prince that I will attend the banquet. Zhu Yi paused, turned his head to look at me, and bristled with agitation. You're going to attend the Crown Prince's birthday banquet? I nodded. And Zhuye stood up and walked out. I rested my chin on my hand, watching his retreating figure, then picked up the brush on the table, dipped it in a bit of cinnabar, and drew a line on my hand. Then I let out an exaggerated hiss. Hearing my cry of pain, Zhuye abruptly halted in his tracks. Half a second later, he turned back to look at me. Where are you hurt? I didn't speak, just stretched out my hand, meeting his concerned gaze. My heart melted completely. Zhuye held my hand, staring at the fake bloodstains on it that couldn't look any more artificial, and fell into silence. Zhu Yi, even when a beauty is silent, it's a sight to behold. I couldn't help but laugh, yet I also felt like crying. Zhu Yi is a descendant of the serpent god, with senses far more acute than those of ordinary mortals. In theory, he should be able to detect the presence of blood in the air within a second, but anxiety clouds judgment. Such a heart, so full of love for me, was betrayed so cruelly in my past life by a heartless woman like me. I wrapped my arms around Zhuye's waist and buried my head in his chest. Zhuye kept a stern face, hooked his finger under my chin, and made me look up at him. Mingjiao, give me an explanation for going to the Crown Prince's birthday banquet. Any explanation would do, even if it was just to fool him, but it couldn't be because of the Crown Prince. At the very least, it can't be said that it was because of the Crown Prince. I saw through Zhuye's thoughts, and it made me ache for him even more. I attended the banquet only for Zhong Lingyu. Hearing this, Zhuye was taken aback, looking at me with a mix of surprise and hurt. Do you like Zhong Lingyu? Me? I was stunned by Zhu Yi's bizarre train of thought. Gritting my teeth, I grabbed his hand and bit it. What on earth is going through this person's mind? After biting, my gaze unconsciously fell on Zhu Yi's long, jade-like fingers. So beautiful. I swallowed hard, my mind wandering into fantasies, so I reached up, hooked my arm around Zhu Yi's neck, and kissed his lips. Zhu Yi didn't expect me to kiss him so suddenly. After a moment of daze, he finally responded to me. Ming Jiao, you. I affectionately traced the shape of his lips with my tongue. How about? In the study today, I had stirred Zhuye to the point of losing his composure. Only then did I realize how insatiable this man could be once his desires were aroused. In the first few days, he had held back only out of fear that I couldn't handle it. Now that he's found out I like it, he's unwilling to let me go. The study was soon in disarray, with all the books on the desk soaked through. I was driven to tears, sobbing intermittently and begging him to be gentler, to go slower. He agreed very sweetly with his words, but in action, he paid no heed at all. Candle night, waves rise and fall. I lost myself several times, my mind went blank, and I forgot to breathe. I nearly drowned in this sea of desire, yet he kept pulling me back up again. The lingering sensations hadn't faded, my body was still trembling, and I couldn't help but push him away, but my hands were weak and limp, lacking strength. making it seem more like a coy refusal. "Zhuye, stop." Zhu Yi bit my earlobe, his warm breath misting in my ear, deliberately mimicking the words I had teased him with that day. He tempted me, making my heart itch, again. On the day of the Crown Prince's birthday banquet, the weather was not very good, the sky was overcast, as if it was about to rain. Candle Night usually never attended such banquets, but this time he went out with me. The banquet was held in the palace, and when we entered the hall, the palace maids led Candle Night and me in two different directions. The reason given was that men and women should be separated and seated apart. Zhu Yi looked displeased. I scratched his palm and whispered in his ear, "After the banquet, let's go home together." Hearing this, Zhu Yi's expression softened. I was led to my seat by the palace maid, but before I could sit down, the announcement of a eunuch echoed from outside the hall. "His Royal Highness the Crown Prince has arrived." Everyone around stood up to pay their respects to the Crown Prince. I looked across the room. Zhu Yi remained seated, showing no intention of rising. As the state preceptor, his status is highly revered. Only on formal occasions is it necessary to salute the emperor, and even then, one need not bow. On sacrificial days, the emperor must instead bow his head to him at the altar. Power, oh, it is truly captivating. Zhu Yi noticed my gaze and looked up to meet my eyes. I smiled at him. He also curved his eyes into a smile. A figure suddenly and inopportunely stepped in between. I was forced to withdraw my gaze and met the Crown Prince's eyes. The Crown Prince, not yet recovered from his severe injury, looked pale, those eyes, as gentle as water as always. Yet with an unmistakable weariness and sorrow, he stood before me, calling my name, Zhao. I looked at him without any expression. As if stung by my reaction, he covered his mouth and coughed up blood. I frowned. Suddenly, I remembered how Zhu Yi vomited blood in my previous life. The Crown Prince, however, thought I was moved for his sake and comforted me softly. "Zhao, don't worry, I'm fine." Me, no, I wasn't worried about you. Thinking of Zhu Yi's terrifyingly sharp hearing, I felt a sudden sense of foreboding in my heart. The Crown Prince, supported by a eunuch, took his seat in the main position on the high platform. I looked in the direction where Zhu Yi was. Then I saw the teacup in Zhu Yi's hand turn into fine powder. Although I truly enjoy the intimate moments with Zhu Yi, but the experience of that day and night in the study still makes my legs weak just thinking about it. In the recent days, I've been restraining Zhu Yi to keep things brief, just once each time. Now, with the Crown Prince stirring up trouble like this, I'm afraid I can't hold it back any longer. I picked up the teacup beside me, deciding to take a sip to calm my nerves. Yet I couldn't help but look up at Zhu Yi again, successfully meeting Zhu Yi's expressionless face. The next second, Zhu Yi looked at me and suddenly smiled. It was a beautiful smile, and also very meaningful. My hand holding the cup trembled unconsciously. Is the princess so unhappy because she heard that the Crown Prince is about to become engaged to Miss Zhong? A woman's voice suddenly rang out. I withdrew my gaze and looked toward the girl who had somehow appeared beside me. The girl looked at me with a smile, thinking I would be upset upon hearing those words. Me, didn't this girl notice the meaningful glances between me and Zhu Yi? How could she think I couldn't smile because of the Crown Prince and Zhong Lingyu? Thinking of Zhong Lingyu, I couldn't help but turn my head and glance toward the lower seats, searching for her figure. Just in time, I saw her rise from her seat and stand up. I stood up as well and said to the girl in front of me, whose minor grievances I had long forgotten over time, "Thanks for the reminder." I sincerely expressed my gratitude, which instantly made the girl's face fall. Zhong Lingyu came from a military family, was very tall, and wore her hair in a high ponytail. When she stood up, she truly stood out like a crane among chickens. Among the eunuchs nearby and the guards outside the hall, many were not as tall as her. I followed Zhong Lingyu all the way to the edge of the rockery. Zhong Lingyu stopped and turned to look at me warily. "Why have you been following me all this time?" The maid beside her tugged at her sleeve and whispered a reminder. "This is the princess consort. The princess consort holds a rank, specifically the first rank, so in principle, as a young lady from a military family without any official rank, she shouldn't address me directly as you from the start." Zhong Lingyu corrected herself in an instant and smiled at me. Why has the princess consort been following me all this time? I was amused by her reaction and waved away the maids following me. "Lingyu, shall we have a chat?" I called out so naturally that Zhong Lingyu widened her eyes in surprise. I hadn't expected to address her with such familiarity at our first meeting. After hesitating for a moment, Zhong Lingyu also dismissed the maids around her. I walked over to Zhong Lingyu and looked up at her. Earlier, that young lady deliberately brought up her and the crown prince to make me feel upset. I was indeed upset, but not because of the crown prince, but because of her. I know you don't want to marry the crown prince, but you're struggling to defy the imperial authority. I can help you with this. As long as you follow me from now on. Zhong Lingyu looked at me in astonishment. After a long pause, he tentatively asked, "You, like women, why does this line of thinking feel so familiar? In my previous life, this person wasn't my confidant, but Zhuye's, right?" Just as I was at a loss for words, I suddenly noticed the air around me turning cold. Without even looking around, I knew Zhuye had arrived. Recalling how I was unexpectedly tricked by the crown prince before, I pretended not to know and looked at Zhong Lingyu with a serious expression. "I only like my husband, Zhuyi." I deliberately pronounced the name Zhuyi with lingering tenderness and intimacy. The surrounding temperature rose, wrapping around me like a warm current. Perfect. Tonight will be a humid yet gentle summer night. Zhuyi, satisfied with the answer, then left. He did not directly appear to disturb the conversation between me and Zhong Lingyu. I looked at Zhong Lingyu, plucked a gardenia flower, and handed it to her. Zhong Lingyu probably misunderstood again. Looking at me with a strange expression, I sighed softly in exasperation and began to recite a poem. "Though 2 leaves are given as a token, our bond shall never fade. Where does shared heart hold resentment? The gardenia touches one most deeply." After listening, Zhong Lingyu's expression instantly changed. This poem originated from the world where Zhong Lingyu once belonged. It was written by Liu Lingxian of the Northern and Southern dynasties. It was also in my previous life that Zhong Lingyu personally recited it to me from memory. Zhong Lingyu didn't particularly care for poetry. The reason she remembered this obscure poem was, first, because she loved gardenias, and second, because this poem celebrates the friendship between women. Zhong Lingyu stared at me with wide eyes, her body trembling with excitement. She took a deep breath and instinctively spoke to test the waters. "Odd functions remain odd, even functions remain even." I paused for 2 seconds, with a mix of helplessness and affection, and continued her line, "The sign depends on the quadrant." Zhong Lingyu was indeed taken aback, stepping forward immediately and gripping my hand tightly. "Sis, are you a time traveler too?" Watching her reveal her true personality and excitement, I couldn't help but laugh. "I'm not, but I have a very, very good friend who is." Zhong Lingyu was at a loss. "A friend?" I nodded, gazing at Zhong Lingyu. "In my past life, you were a friend who stood by me through life and death. You saw my ambition. Yet you never laughed at me for overreaching or dreaming the impossible. Instead, you reached out, put a hand on my shoulder, and said, 'Why can't a woman be an emperor?' Of course a woman can be an emperor." Unfortunately, I later lost in the political struggle with the crown prince because of the word love, although I managed to protect Zhong Lingyu before my death. I imagine her days won't be much easier. After all, like me, Lingyu is someone who deeply craves freedom, power, and control over her own destiny. Fortunately, time has reversed, and now there's a chance to start over. Thinking of the reversal of time and space, I couldn't help but picture the figure kneeling on the altar before me, and the blooming splatters of blood. Zhuyi. Even if I hadn't been moved by Zhuyi in my past life, for this scene alone, I think I would have fallen for him. I am no fool. Of course I knew that Zhuyi deliberately bound my soul to his side, making me witness everything he sacrificed for me. He wants me to love him out of guilt, but he doesn't know that my fondness for him actually began much earlier. Thus, his scheming only makes me feel sorry for him. As my thoughts returned to the present, I looked at Zhong Lingyu standing before me. "Have you made up your mind? Do you want to follow me?" Zhong Lingyu's excitement still hadn't subsided. And upon hearing this, she immediately hugged me. "Yes, yes, yes, your XX." The last 2 words were directly muted. Zhong Lingyu realized this and was so furious he could have burst, raising his head to curse the heavens. "Damn it, I can say transmigration, but I can't say crossing X. I'm not XXXX." It was happening again. In his previous life, Zhong Lingyu had been restricted by the rules of this world, unable to utter certain specific words, so when he spoke to me, his words would be missing characters, making them completely incomprehensible at first listen. But I've been close to her for nearly a decade, and no matter how hard it is to understand her words, over time, I can still guess the gist of it. It's highly likely that my world is a scripted novel, and she is a transmigrator who knows the plot but cannot reveal its contents to me. Judging from her attitude and understanding of me, I'm probably an extremely important character in the book. I leaned lazily against the rockery, smiling as I watched Zhong Lingyu scold the heavens with her hands on her hips. This person is still so full of vitality. The phrase full of vitality was also taught to me by Zhong Lingyu in my past life. At that time, she leaned on my shoulder and said, "Jiao Jiao, most of the women in this capital are like the living dead. They seem alive, but in truth, they're already dead, with not a shred of vitality." She didn't know that before I met her and Zhuye in my youth, I too was one of the living dead. My father ignored me, my mother mistreated me, and I placed my spiritual and emotional hopes in the Empress and the Crown Prince, only for them to abandon me in unison. In my confusion and pain, I struggled desperately, and it was only with her and Zhuye's help that I managed to crawl out of the mire. In this lifetime, I will live as a true and genuine person. I refuse to spend my entire life toiling and bustling about, like the Empress and my mother, solely for the sake of men. I will ascend to that supreme throne and tell the world, a woman can also rule the world with authority while awake and recline with a beauty by her side when drunk. After parting with Zhong Lingyu, I headed back, but halfway, I was intercepted by the Crown Prince. The prince, wrapped in a cloak, had broken into a cold sweat on his forehead due to the pain from his unhealed severe injury. "Your Highness is unwell and should return to the palace early. There's no need to wait on the road to intercept me." Before I could finish speaking, a joyful smile appeared on the prince's face. "Is Ajiao feeling sorry for me?" Me. I looked at the Crown Prince with an expressionless face. The smile on the Crown Prince's face gradually faded, replaced by a bitter expression. "Ajiao, are you resenting me for making you marry the state preceptor?" I shook my head. "Although it was you who proposed marrying Zhuye, it was also something I agreed to after careful consideration. In this matter, if we examine it closely, you don't owe me anything. Similarly, I don't owe you anything either. As an orphan girl with a noble title but no parents, my lack of sufficient benefits and my alignment with your faction made me no longer worth winning over. It's only natural that you abandoned me. If I were in your position, I would most likely do the same as you. We are both people who value power more. The reason we ended up in a life-or-death struggle in our previous lives was simply because we were political rivals, and there was only one throne. It had nothing to do with love." The Crown Prince didn't expect me to be so calm, his expression growing increasingly unpleasant. "Jiao, are you completely indifferent to me now?" I rubbed my forehead. Why didn't I realize in my past life that the Crown Prince was so trapped by love at this time? Perhaps it's because, in my past life, I also had feelings for the Crown Prince at this time. It wasn't a deep, unforgettable love, but as childhood sweethearts who grew up together, there was always a flutter of affection. After all, at that time, I had nothing, so the Crown Prince, who always protected me, and the Empress, who treated me like her own daughter, became my lifelines. I see the Queen as my future mother-in-law and the Crown Prince as my future husband. I thought I would be the future Crown Princess. For every kindness they showed me, I repaid them tenfold. Then they told me I had to marry the state preceptor, Zhuye, with whom I had never exchanged a word. I need to win over Zhuye to strengthen the Crown Prince's faction. Or else if the third prince ascends the throne, they will all die. After hearing these words, I shut myself in the pitch-black room, letting tears soak my pillow. The next day, I signed my name on the marriage contract that Candle Knight had delivered. I thought, I must save them. They were the two people in the world who treated me the best. I couldn't just stand by and watch them die. Looking back now, I really wasn't loved enough back then. If only I had met Zhuye or Zhong Lingyu first, I wouldn't have shed those tears all night for nothing. Recalling all the past events, I ignored the Crown Prince and walked straight past him. The Crown Prince reached out as if to stop me, but in the end, his hand only brushed against my sleeve. "The Queen Mother wishes to see you." The Crown Prince's weak voice sounded behind me, and I couldn't help but halt my steps. Seeing that I was finally moved, the crown prince glanced at the eunuch beside him and ordered, "Escort the princess to the Pepper Chamber Palace to see the Empress." I waved my hand without turning my head. "No need, I know the way to the Pepper Chamber Palace." The crown prince was taken aback, forcing a bitter smile. "So, in your heart, the Empress truly matters more than I do. If I wished to see you, I suppose you would not come." I sighed softly and turned to face the crown prince. With utmost formality and distance, I offered a bow. "Your Highness, please show some restraint. I am now a married woman." On the way to see the Empress, I encountered an unexpected guest. Marquis Shen Jinghui. Shen Jinghui, known for his frivolous nature, was drunk at the moment and even more confused. He actually blocked my path and tried to embrace me. I was annoyed and dragged him directly to the nearby lake. Pushing his head into the water, I naturally knew that Shen Jinghui's sudden appearance was orchestrated by someone behind the scenes. And the person behind it was most likely the third prince and the imperial consort. The reason was nothing more than to drive a wedge between me, the Empress, and the crown prince. But no matter how many twists and turns lie behind the scenes, it doesn't stop me from dealing with Shen Jinghui right now. In my past life, Shen Jinghui married Princess Changning, yet he frequently visited pleasure quarters after their marriage, causing her to die of sorrow. I entered the palace at the age of 6 to serve as a study companion for Princess Changning, the Empress's legitimate daughter. At that time, I hadn't yet been granted the title of Junju, and by status, I was the only child of the Prince of Anan. Everyone in the palace knew that the Emperor harbored extreme hatred for the Prince of Anan because of the Empress, and the Prince of Anan had been bedridden with illness for many years. As a result, the palace staff treated me decently on the surface, but their attitude in private was rather poor. Changning, 2 years younger than me, was naturally kind-hearted and treated me like an older sister, often standing up for me. Although I later had disagreements with the Empress and the Crown Prince, I always regarded Changning as a younger sister. Shen Jinghui, jolted awake by the cold water of the lake, finally came to his senses and struggled incessantly. I held him down expressionlessly, forcing him to gulp several mouthfuls of lake water before leisurely releasing my grip. Shen Jinghui lay sprawled on the ground, coughing incessantly, glaring at me furiously. "Ming Zhao, have you lost your mind?" I looked down at him from above. The title of Marquis is merely a way to elevate one's status. Shen Jinghui is currently just the legitimate son of the Marquis's household, without any official title. In terms of rank, he simply cannot outrank me. Shen Jinghui rose from the ground with resentment, pointing at my nose and saying, "The princess truly has such great authority, daring to kill someone while residing deep within the palace." I brushed his hand away and replied indifferently, "I can't compare to you, still indulging in your lustful ways in the palace. You're already a fool, yet you seek your own doom." Shen Jinghui's face flushed red with anger, his neck bulging. "I'm going to tell my aunt right now and ask her to uphold justice for me." The aunt Shen Jinghui referred to was the Empress. It is precisely because of this connection that he, a son of a Marquis's household, could be respectfully addressed as young Marquis even before being officially designated as the heir. After Shen Jinghui left, the maid who had witnessed the entire scene looked at me with trepidation. "Your Highness," I turned to her and reassured her, "Don't worry." After saying that, I continued on my way to the Pepper Chamber Palace. When I arrived at the Pepper Chamber Palace, Shen Jinghui was already kneeling before the Empress, tears and mucus streaming down his face, putting on a pitiful act with remarkable skill. When Shen Jinghui saw me arrive, he couldn't suppress the joy in his eyes. "Aunt, you must stand up for me. Ming Zhao first harmed the Crown Prince, and now she wants to kill me. How can such a malicious troublemaker be allowed to continue wreaking havoc in this world?" I remained expressionless and bowed to the Empress. The Empress gazed at me deeply. The hall fell into an absolute silence, with all the palace attendants holding their breath. Shen Jinghui's smile grew wider and wider. Suddenly, the Empress took my hand and spoke gently. "Ming Zhao has always been well behaved and has never done anything wrong." He then looked at Shen Jinghui, his eyes full of warning. "You drank too much and accidentally fell into the lake. How can you blame her?" The smile on Shen Jinghui's face froze instantly. He looked at the Empress in disbelief, then at me. Leaving the pepper chamber, Shen Jinghui still looked distracted. I couldn't be bothered to deal with him and walked ahead on my own, but Shun Jinghui caught up to me. Why would my aunt take your side? Today is probably the most intellectually curious day Shun Jinghui has ever had in his life. I looked at Shun Jinghui and was reminded of the Empress's gentle face and her dignified, composed demeanor. Perhaps it's because I am still useful to the Empress, and the Crown Prince cannot afford to lose my support right now, or perhaps it's because the Empress is merely your aunt, but she is my birth mother. In my past life, I was defeated by the Crown Prince, not because of love, not because of friendship, but because of family ties, rather than saying I was defeated by the Crown Prince. It would be more accurate to say I was defeated by the Empress, defeated by my longing for a mother-daughter bond. The poisoned wine that took my life was delivered in the Empress's name by the Crown Prince. I walked onto the winding corridor, raising my eyes. I saw Zhu Yi standing at the far end. In an instant, all my worries vanished. I lifted my skirt and ran towards Zhu Yi. He caught me in his arms. The banquet is over. Shall we go home together? Zhu Yi looked down at me, his eyes twinkling like stars. I looked up and saw the Crown Prince standing in the distance. I averted my gaze and said to Zhu Yi, "Okay." Zhu Yi took my hand, his grip a bit firm. Clearly, he had also seen the Crown Prince. According to the way they say it in Zhonglingyu's world, both Zhu Yi and I are people with extreme insecurity. But I have memories from my past life, and I know how much Zhu Yi loves me, so my heart is at peace. Zhu Yi, however, has no such memories. To him, my change of heart came too abruptly, making him uneasy. But if he had memories from his past life, he would probably despise me. In my past life, I married him because of the Crown Prince, yet grew distant from him due to the Crown Prince's suspicions. Later, I turned against the Crown Prince, but for the sake of the throne, I pushed him even further away. How wicked! I cursed myself silently, looking at Zhu Yi again, seeing him torn between hope and fear. I couldn't help but feel a pang of heartache. I owe him far, far too much. I held Zhu Yi's hand tightly, our fingers interlocked. Zhu Yi's tense body suddenly relaxed as he looked down at me. I curved my eyes into a smile and said, "Let's go home." As I passed by the Crown Prince, I caught the scent of blood on him. Zhu Yi's senses were far keener than mine, so he naturally smelled it too. His steps faltered slightly. I kept my expression unchanged and led Zhu Yi out of the palace gates. Once we were in the carriage, Zhu Yi looked at me. "I thought you would care about the prince's injuries. His wounds have reopened." I turned to look at Zhu Yi. "If I don't care, would you think me heartless?" Zhu Yi immediately shook his head. "Of course not." I laughed. "Then that's settled. Although his injury was caused by me, it was not instigated by me. What I need to care about is not his injury, but your heart." Zhu Yi was stunned. I sat in Zhu Yi's lap, cupped his face, kissed him, and tried to give him a sense of security. "Let me say it again. The one I like now is you. Chuya, I hope you are happy, and I also hope you know my heart." Just as we were kissing passionately, unable to part, the carriage suddenly came to a halt. My body lurched forward due to inertia, and I accidentally bit his lip. Zhu Yi let out a soft, pleasant hum. I quickly sat up to check the wound on his lip. Fortunately, it was only a small cut. I breathed a sigh of relief and went to rummage through the medicine box in the carriage. Seeing me worried for him, Zhu Yi instead laughed and pulled me back in one swift motion. "It's nothing. This little injury means nothing to me." As he spoke, he took my hand and pressed it against his lips. The wound healed in an instant. I forgot he wasn't an ordinary man, but a descendant of the snake god who could regenerate flesh from bones. I blinked, surprised that I could be so absent-minded. But Zhu Yi was clearly overjoyed, holding the back of my head and kissing me again. Suddenly, the coachman's voice came from outside the carriage. "Grand Preceptor, the carriage from General Zhong's residence ahead has encountered a problem. In my previous life, I thought all the attendants around Zhu Yi were real people. It was only later that I learned most of them were puppets made to resemble humans and imbued with spiritual energy. The carriage driver at this moment was one of those puppets." Hearing the driver's words, I pushed Zhu Yi away, straightened my clothes and hair, lifted the curtain by the carriage window, and looked outside. Sure enough, Zhonglingyu and her mother were seen getting down from the broken carriage. I looked at Zhu Yi, who was frowning and sitting up, clearly annoyed by the disturbance. "The general's residence is still quite far from here. shall we take Lingyu and her mother into our carriage and send them back to the estate?" Upon hearing this, Juye's frown deepened, yet he didn't want to refuse me outright. The whole person looked like a delicate, beautiful piece of porcelain cast in a dim light. I raised an eyebrow. "What's wrong?" Juyi reached out and pulled me into his arms, resting his chin on my shoulder, and said gloomily, "They were just discussing you and the crown prince in the carriage. I found it somewhat amusing. Who did this person learn this pitiful voice and expression from? Wait. Could it be that they learned it from me?" I raised my hand and stroked Juyi's head, as if petting a cat. "Your hair is so beautiful. What did they say about me and the crown prince? I was in the carriage just now and didn't hear anything at all." Juyi, with his exceptional hearing, began recounting the conversation between Zhong Lingyu and her mother. "Mother, do you also not wish for me to marry the crown prince? The crown prince and Princess Mingjiao are in love. His affection for her is known throughout the land. At today's banquet, the crown prince was well aware that the state preceptor and the princess were already married, yet he insisted on enforcing the rule that men and women must be seated separately. The reasoning was full of holes, but the crown prince was stubborn and reckless, paying no heed to reason. "My daughter, if you resembled Princess Mingjiao in appearance, perhaps you could, like the current noble consort who replaced the empress, become the most favored in the harem. But you and Princess Mingjiao share no resemblance at all." The tone of Juye's voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. Hearing this, I couldn't help but laugh. Upon hearing my laughter, Juye gently nibbled on my earlobe and deliberately repeated in my ear, "The crown prince and Princess Mingjiao are in love." When he read the word sentient beings, Juyi deliberately raised his voice. Hearing this, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Juyi turned to look at me, gritting his teeth in feigned anger. "Mingjiao." I turned my head and kissed him. The Grand Preceptor getting jealous is really amusing. Juyi was extremely easy to placate. I pressed him against the carriage wall and kissed him thoroughly, and his jealousy melted away. But still unwilling to let Zhong Lingyu and her mother get on the carriage, I was puzzled by Juyi's attitude, and seeing him blush with embarrassment, I followed his gaze downward. Then, I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. This situation really isn't suitable for Lingyu to bring her mother onto the carriage. When the desires of the night candle arise, they are hard to quell. The state preceptor's residence is relatively close by, so Juyi summoned a bird to perch on his shoulder. He effortlessly hypnotized it, sending it to the residence to inform the other puppet servants to prepare a new carriage and escort Zhong Lingyu and her mother back to the general's mansion. I watched in amazement, unable to suppress a growing admiration for Juyi's divine power. Just a longing, not a scheme. Juyi met my gaze, knowing I was interested in his power, and showed no displeasure. Instead, he smiled and asked, "Want to learn?" I was taken aback. Can a mere mortal like me also learn magic? Juyi looked at me, his gaze deepening for a moment as if lost in thought. Others may not be able to, but you can. Unaware of his expression, my heart swelled with the joy of being able to learn magic, and my eyes instantly lit up. The candlelit night's smile was bewitching as he leaned down to kiss my eyes. "Tonight, I'll teach you. We'll start with dual cultivation." Summer nights are especially stirring to the emotions. The rain poured down heavily, beating against the flower branches outside the window. The air was hot and humid, the flower branches trembled in the wind, dripping with moisture. Juyi kept gazing at me, his eyes as beautiful as if they held a swirling galaxy, luring me to sink into them, wanting to explore, yet falling deeper and deeper. My tears were forced out, only to be kissed away by him. Gentle yet domineering. Occasionally, when he lost control of his strength, he would apologetically let me bite him. But when I couldn't hold on any longer and my fingers clawed at his back, he firmly grasped my wrists without any room for refusal, interlocking our fingers, and pinned them against the edge of the bed. "Be careful not to break your nails. I'm afraid it'll hurt you." Juyi's eyelashes were all wet, and after saying this with a smile, he leaned down to kiss my collarbone again. "If you're afraid it'll hurt me, why are you making such a fuss?" I wanted to bite him, but he picked me up and carried me to the couch by the window. Once again, we fit together perfectly. The summer night's downpour did not cease until the break of dawn. I lay contentedly in Juyi's embrace, playing with his fingers. "Grand State Preceptor, if you support me as the Empress, how about becoming my consort?" Zhu gently and tenderly kissed my temple. After it's done, how will the Empress reward me? I held Zhu 2 fingers, looking up at him with a playful smile. Well, Zhu was easily stirred to passion by me. Lowering his head to kiss me deeply. The sun hasn't risen yet. The night isn't over. Let's go again first. A few days later, it was my birthday. Zhu wanted to throw a grand birthday celebration for me, but I didn't agree. The Crown Prince and I were actually born on the same year, same month, and same day. He's only a few hours older than me. Today is just a fake birthday made up for me by the Princess of Anan. No need to go to any trouble. Zhu paused in his movements and turned to look at me. I held on to him and continued. The Crown Prince is actually the son of the Prince of Anan and his consort, and I am the daughter of the Emperor and the Empress. Upon hearing this, Zhu couldn't help but frown. I gazed at Zhu and suddenly remembered my previous life. That late night when I learned about my true origins, my mind was in turmoil, and I drank myself into a stupor, in my dazed state. I followed my instincts and ran to the front of Zhu's house. Along the way, the alcohol took effect, making my limbs weak and limp. Without a lantern to light the path, I couldn't see clearly and stumbled several times. Covered in mud from head to toe, I was in the most wretched state. Inside the house, Zhu sat under the lamp, like a figure carved from jade, like the bright moon in the sky, lofty and unattainable, so very far from me. That night, Zhu looked at me through the window. His gaze as calm as still water. Meeting his gaze, I felt inexplicably ashamed and turned to run back. The branches in the garden scratched my face, but I didn't even notice, until Zhu pulled me into his embrace. He asked me, "What are you running from?" The last time he spoke to me was 3 years ago, because I decided to join forces with the Crown Prince to deal with the third prince and the Imperial consort, which led to a fierce argument between us. I remained silent. Avoiding looking at his face, I only lowered my gaze, watching as his clean robe was stained by the mud on my clothes. "What happened?" Zhu asked me again, his voice soft but unable to conceal his concern. He was already very weak at that time, but I was too drunk to notice. I wanted to tell him about my true origins, to let him know my confusion and pain, but the words stuck in my throat, and I couldn't speak them. I haven't treated him well, so how can I have the face to seek comfort from him? I can't let him get involved in the conflict between me and the Crown Prince either. The royal family holds the magic array that can imprison him. Once he opposes them, he will lose his freedom. So I broke free from Zhu's embrace and replied to him calmly, "Nothing's wrong, I just, on a whim, drank too much and accidentally ended up here." After saying that, I started walking forward, but the pain in my ankle made me grimace. The next second, Zhu scooped me up in his arms. His expression was indifferent, his tone equally so. "You've sprained your ankle, I'll take you back to where you live." Listening to Zhu's words, I suddenly felt a bit ridiculous. Of course, the one being ridiculous was me, not him, as husband and wife, living in the same mansion. Yet we have to separate my residence from his. If on the wedding night, I wasn't afraid of snakes, not afraid of pain, held no lingering feelings for the Crown Prince, and had no subconscious resistance towards the silent candle at night, would everything have turned out differently? But what's done is done. I couldn't help but feel sad, yet I felt I didn't deserve to be sad. The bitter fruit was of my own making, and I should be the one to swallow it. Pretending to be overwhelmed by the alcohol, I nestled closer into Zhu's embrace. Zhu's body stiffened slightly, holding me even tighter. That night was the first peaceful and argument-free conversation between Zhu and me after we got married. The next day, when we woke up, Zhu and I returned to our usual selves. I left early and returned late, striving for the power I desired. A year passed without seeing Zhu, and we became like strangers once again. The memories faded as I looked at Zhu before me. Tears welled up, yet I couldn't help but smile. The rebirth Zhu risked his life to give me led to a marriage completely different from our previous life. Zhu didn't understand why I suddenly laughed while talking about my own background. His brows still furrowed. I reached out to smooth his forehead and couldn't help but say, "Zhu, I really like you so much, Tilda." Zhu didn't expect me to suddenly confess to him in a coquettish manner, his pupils slightly widening. I was amused by his innocent reaction and leaned in to kiss his cheek. Zhu said he would personally cook a birthday feast to make up for me. I knew the scale of the birthday feast he mentioned would probably be comparable to the full Manchuhan banquet Ling you described, so I quickly tried to stop him. Just give me a bowl of longevity noodles to make up for it. I am just a mortal. Learning magic doesn't mean I can have a long life. But Zhuye is a descendant of the snake god. As long as he doesn't lose his divine power, his lifespan is destined to be thousands of times longer than mine, and I would only be a silhouette in the long river of his years. In my past life, this was also one of the reasons I retreated in front of him, because I lacked love so much. I yearned to be loved. I wanted to be cherished in someone's heart forever, not just a passerby in his life for a while. But in this lifetime, I won't overthink things anymore. Life is short. So seize the moment and enjoy it. Live as long as you can, and don't waste the good times. That's what matters most. With that thought, I wrapped my arms around Zhuyi's neck and kissed him. A few days ago, on the night of my true birthday, you already gave me the best birthday gift. Zhuyi looked at me, not quite catching on. I laughed and whispered ambiguously in his ear, "Let's have another summer night's rain, Tilda." It was already 2 hours later when I ate the longevity noodles that Zhuyi had made for me. Just after finishing, Princess Changning came to give me a birthday gift. She bought me the latest fashionable clothes and jewelry, and also brought a kite she had made herself. Seeing the beautiful kite, my eyes felt a bit teary. On this day in my past life, Changning also came to the state preceptor's residence, promising to fly kites with me together in the spring of the following year. Unfortunately, when the spring of the following year arrived, she was no longer here. I looked at Changning. "Your marriage with Shen Jinghui." Changning looked at me with a hint of shyness. "It's already settled, just 3 months from now." I instantly furrowed my brows tightly. I thought that after I hit Shen Jinghui and brought the matter before the Empress will investigate Shen Jinghui and then discover that he is not a good person, thus becoming unwilling to let Changning marry him. After all, compared to me, a daughter in name only, Changning is the cherished pearl who has been by the Empress's side for many years. Their bond is much deeper, but I never expected the Empress would not only abandon me for the Crown Prince but also abandon Changning for the Crown Prince. Shen Jinghui's mother had already passed away, so even though he was the Empress's nephew by blood, the lack of that maternal bond made both the Empress and the Crown Prince uneasy about him. That's why they hoped he would marry Changning. To strengthen their familial ties through marriage, Changning was startled when she saw the gloom in my expression. "Sister Mingjiao, what's wrong with you?" I held Changning's hand, looking at her steadily. "Changning, do you want to marry Shen Jinghui?" Hearing this, Changning blushed. "Lord Shen is handsome, and his household has been prospering more each year. Marrying him would benefit both the Empress and the Crown Prince. I am willing." I let go of Changning's hand, as if seeing my past self, feeling a mix of frustration and disappointment. "Marrying Shen Jinghui may benefit the Empress and the Crown Prince, but for you, the disadvantages far outweigh the advantages. And what's so handsome about Shen Jinghui anyway? Candle Night beats him by 1,000 miles. I stood up, intending to take Changning to visit the nearby male brothel. I wanted to show her what truly handsome men who rely on their looks to serve others really look like. However, just as I had taken a couple of steps with her, I saw Candle Night stepping over the threshold and coming in. Both Changning and I halted in our tracks. I stopped out of guilt. After all, a male brothel is a place where men entertain clients, while Changning froze because he has always been afraid of Zhuyi, and didn't dare to move. In truth, there are few people in the entire capital who aren't afraid of Zhuyi. After all, Zhuyi always appeared cold and indifferent to the outside world, gloomy and possessing divine power, making him extremely formidable. It made people feel that offending him would inevitably lead to a miserable death. There were even rumors in the capital that Zhuyi would devour human hearts during the full moon. Chang Ning, upon seeing Zhuyi, felt as if she had encountered the king of hell and instinctively wanted to flee. After taking a few steps, she seemed to remember something, hesitated for a moment, then turned back. She took a small wooden box from her sleeve and stuffed it into my arms. "Sister Mingjiao, I have something to attend to. I must go now." With that, Changning scurried away in a flash, holding the small wooden box. I noticed the words "For our Zhao's eyes only" carved on it and immediately knew who had asked Changning to deliver it to me. The Crown Prince. Zhuyi saw the wooden box and didn't pay much attention to it at first. Seeing that I hadn't opened it, he thought I didn't have enough strength. So he took the box from my hand and opened it. I wanted to stop him, but it was already too late. Ji saw the wooden carving inside the box. There are two children, a boy and a girl around 6 or 7 years old, sitting together at a connected desk, reading. Every year on my birthday, the Crown Prince gives me a wooden carving that he made himself. Over the years, I've watched the Crown Prince's carving skills grow from clumsy to masterful, so much so that, at this moment, Jia recognized it at a glance. The girl on the wood carving is me, the boy is the Crown Prince. Zhu Yi's gaze suddenly turned sinister. A flash of light from his fingers split the wood carving in half. Then, without hesitation, he threw the Crown Prince's half into the lake outside the window. Me, I don't know why, but I suddenly felt a little like laughing. Zhu Yi took the remaining wood carvings and went to the small wooden shed behind the study. I didn't follow immediately. Instead, I sat at the desk, recording the major events that had happened in my previous life, so as not to forget them as time passed. After a few hours, I finally put down my pen and went to find Zhu Yi. I noticed he had already recarved that half of the wooden sculpture, and with great ingenuity, transformed the desk into a lotus leaf. So the little girl reading at the desk became a little girl lying on a lotus leaf picking lotus flowers. I have to say, it's quite adorable. Although I was never that innocent and carefree when I was a child, I fiddled with the wooden carving for a while, then turned to look at another piece that Zhu Yi was carving in his hands, a younger version of him and a younger version of me, sitting across from each other at a chessboard, playing a game. Though it was a scene that had never actually happened, he had carved it so vividly, as if such a day had truly existed in the past. It's just that, my gaze drifted downward, and I noticed that Zhu Yi had carved himself with human legs, but for me, he had carved a snake's tail. Me, what kind of twisted taste is this? I couldn't help but frown. Zhu Yi noticed my expression and paused his movements. Did I carve it poorly? I remained silent for 2 seconds before speaking. The carving is excellent, comparable to a master's work, but, have I ever told you that I'm not particularly fond of snakes? Zhu Yi suddenly felt as if I had stabbed him in the heart. His body stiffening, he visibly became dejected and despondent. As soon as I said it, I realized it was wrong and quickly corrected myself. What I meant is, I don't really like snakes other than you. Zhu Yi pursed his lips and didn't respond to my words. I regretted it deeply. Sitting down beside Zhu Yi, I reached out and poked him. Zhu Yi turned his head away, not looking at me. I hugged Zhu Yi and, to explain, began to tell him about my childhood. Actually, before I was 6. I really liked snakes. I remember there was an injured snake that entered the prince's mansion back then. It was exceptionally beautiful. I picked it up and secretly fed it cooked meat. But later, the princess saw the snake and was frightened by it. She got very angry and had the snake beaten to death. And then, I paused for a moment before speaking in a light tone, and to punish me, she threw me into the snake pit. Zhu Yi looked down at me and pulled me into his embrace. In my past life, recalling this would make my body tremble involuntarily. But now, leaning against Zhu Yi, I felt no fear. As if I were talking about someone else's story, I shifted into a more comfortable position in Zhu Yi's arms and continued. The snake pit was very dark. The entrance above sealed shut by a massive stone. I couldn't get out, and I couldn't see clearly. I could only hear the hissing of countless snakes flicking their tongues, feeling them crawl over my body, and then being bitten by them. Princess Anan didn't want me to die. She had released only non-venomous snakes, but I didn't know that. I was already running a high fever that day, and in the snake pit, I was terrified, cold, in pain, and heartbroken, unable to understand why mother hated me so much. At this point, I paused and looked up at Zhu Yi. In my dazed state, I felt myself being picked up. I tried to see who it was, but all I could make out was the moonlight falling. Candle Night held my hand a little tighter. My gaze flickered slightly as I studied Zhu Yi's expression, and I continued. The next day when I woke up, I was already lying in a temple near the snake pit, with no signs of snake bites on my body. The Crown Prince stood before me, looking at me with concern. I asked the Crown Prince how I got here, and he said he didn't know. I thought everything that happened in the snake pit was just an illusion, but ever since then, I've been afraid of snakes. Zhu Yi suddenly spoke coldly. The Crown Prince said he didn't know. Hearing this, I made my judgment and nodded, saying, I believed that for many years, only to realize later that it was wrong. That night in the snake pit, I was indeed bitten all over by snakes, and I was indeed saved by someone. As I said this, I reached out and hooked my arm around Zhu Yi's neck, gazing deep into his eyes. Was it you who saved me that night? I unintentionally phrased the question with the tone of a statement. Zhu Yi met my focused gaze and leaned in for a kiss. It was me. I gazed at Zhu Yi. I had my suspicions about this matter in my past life, but by then, my relationship with Zhu Yi had already reached a point of no return. My struggle with the Crown Prince had also escalated to a fever pitch. Several times, I picked up a lantern intending to seek out Zhu Yi, only to turn back halfway each time. So it was only now that what happened when I was 6 years old in my previous life was truly confirmed and brought to light. For a moment, I was overwhelmed with mixed emotions. I wanted to laugh, but my eyes welled up with tears first. So it turned out, the first person in this world who was kind to me, not the Queen, nor the Crown Prince, it was Zhu Yi, the last person who was kind to me. It was also Zhu Yi, going around in circles, from beginning to end. It has always been Zhu Yi. Zhu Yi told me that when he carried me into the temple that night, the Crown Prince was playing by the roadside with his maids and eunuchs. So, the Crown Prince had known all along. He just deceived me. After hearing this, I fell silent. Should I blame the Crown Prince? But he was only 6 years old at the time. But I held Zhu Yi, my voice muffled as I spoke. If I had known it was you who saved me back then, I wouldn't have been so resistant when I had to marry you. Zhu Yi instantly seized the key point, narrowing his eyes dangerously. You're really resistant to the idea of marrying me. Me, I accidentally dug my own grave. I took a light breath, smoothing Candle Knight's fur. No, his scales. I hadn't even spoken to you back then. Every time I see you, you're sitting in a high position, with a gloomy expression on your face. Your true form is still the snake that I fear. In this situation, it's quite normal for me to be hesitant about marrying you, right? But every time I hear the palace servants say the Grand Preceptor is the most beautiful person in the world, I wholeheartedly agree in my heart. The beauty of Zhu Yi is undeniable to anyone in the entire dynasty who has ever seen him. He is truly the epitome of unparalleled handsomeness, unmatched in this world. With every word I speak, I plant a kiss on Zhu Yi. Zhu Yi is left utterly speechless by my kisses, unable to resist. He gently pinched the back of my neck and pulled me away. I looked up at him with a pitiful expression. Zhu Yi had long been softened by my kisses, yet he still pretended to be firm and said, I was scowling because you always go everywhere with the Crown Prince. Of course I couldn't put on a pleasant face. I couldn't help but laugh, reaching out to poke Zhu Yi's chest again. Actually, I've always been curious about one thing, Zhu Yi. Why do you like me? When I was 6 years old, you came to save me. I guess you just happened to pass by, saw how pitiful I was, and did a good deed on a whim. But after that, we had no further interactions. Zhu Yi grasped my hand that was causing mischief on his chest, staring at me intently. I've never had the habit of passing by a snake den on the mountain to save someone. The meaning of Zhu Yi's words is, I couldn't help but freeze, staring at him in astonishment. Zhu Yi met my gaze and spoke with utmost seriousness. Ming Zhao. Whether you believe it or not, from the past until now, I have only ever come for you. At any other time, hearing Zhu Yi say this to me, I would have found it romantic. But, I was only 6 years old at the time. Aren't you a bit of a beast? I frowned, looking at Zhu Yi with disapproval. Zhu Yi. Zhu Yi looked at me without a word, reaching out to gently tap my head. What are you thinking? You were so young back then, how could I have had any other intentions? I pretended to be hurt by the tap, letting out a soft ouch. Zhu Yi immediately reached out to rub my head. Does it hurt? I clearly lightened my touch. I took the opportunity to bury myself in Zhu Yi's embrace. Then, why did you come for me at that time? Zhu Yi paused the motion of rubbing my head, and only after a few seconds did he continue. I was feeling a bit drowsy from Zhu Yi sneezing, and seeing that he wasn't speaking, I began to speculate on my own. Do you know the elders around me? Did they ask you to come save me? No. Then have you seen me before this? Zhu Yi let out a soft lowering his gaze to look at me. You have done me a favor. I never expected it to be for this reason. Before I was 6 years old, I could hardly take care of myself, let alone do favors for others. After much thought, the only thing I could recall was that snake I once fed meat to. Are you, that pretty little snake? Candle night, you could say so. Can that really be considered so? I was puzzled. I watched that snake get beaten to death with my own eyes. You, Zhu Yi, it is not my true form, I merely attached a fragment of my consciousness to it. My question was answered, yet an even greater confusion arose in my heart. Zhu Yi said he came for me. So was it truly just a coincidence when I found that injured snake back then? If it wasn't a coincidence, then what was the origin of it all? That night I had a dream. In the dream, my legs transformed into a beautiful serpent's tail. In the night sky, lightning flashed, extremely terrifying, as if a heavenly tribulation had descended, and by my side, a phantom figure accompanied me, anxiously calling out, "Zhu Ming." When I woke up the next day, everything from the dream had become hazy, and the real sky was a clear, brilliant blue, without wind or rain. I waved goodbye to Zhu Yi and got into the carriage, leaving the Imperial Preceptor's residence. Last time we met, Zhong Lingyu and I had agreed to meet again today at a little visited temple on the mountain outside the city. Zhong Lingyu was very punctual. She arrived right after I entered the temple. I've already discussed it with my mother. I'm willing to give everything I can to avoid marrying the crown prince. Zhong Lingyu looked at me and spoke earnestly. After listening, I directly handed her a small booklet. Inside were the follow-up plans I had devised based on events from my past life and an analysis of the current situation. Zhong Lingyu opened it, carefully read through to the end, and smiled. I couldn't help but sigh again, even though I've been living in this world for over a decade. Why do I still have the mindset of a modern engineering student and haven't learned any of the political maneuvering skills you people possess? I also laughed. Your skills are certainly no less than mine. I truly mean it. Zhong Lingyu knows a great many things, and she can even make glass, cement, cannons. Each of these things, in this world, has immense value. To me, she is a true treasure. Under the deliberate arrangement between Zhong Lingyu and me, rumors of our discord quickly spread throughout the capital. Although I am fully confident in my path to reclaim the throne after my rebirth, even with the certainty of victory, I must still consider the worst possible outcomes in my actions. In the race between the tortoise and the hare also thought it would surely win, and what was the result? Pride goes before a fall. It has always been so, so I will pretend to be at odds with Zhong Lingyu, on one hand, to lure the Crown Prince and the Third Prince's factions into taking the bait. On the other hand, if I truly prove useless and fail in my endeavors in the future, Lingyu can still clear her name of any association with me and avoid being implicated. Rumors spread like wildfire, growing with the wind, wider and wider. Even the matter of me previously having Candle Night borrow a carriage to send Zhong Lingyu and her mother home was dug up, and my goodwill, with the combined efforts of both Zhong Lingyu and me, was naturally interpreted by most people in the capital as ill intent. I heard the princess didn't want Miss Zhong, the general's daughter, to become the crown princess. First, she deliberately sent someone to sabotage the Zhong family's carriage, then pretended to be kind to get close to Miss Zhong, but in reality, she secretly drugged her, causing Miss Zhong to break out in red rashes all over her body. Miss Zhong is already so tall, making it hard for her to marry, and now her appearance has been ruined. Depressed and heartbroken, she has fallen seriously ill. The princess is no longer an unmarried maiden, yet she treats Miss Zhong so harshly. I wonder how the crown prince would react if he heard about this. How would he react? Our crown prince is a devoted lover. I'm afraid Miss Zhong can only swallow this injustice in silence, wearing veiled hats that concealed our faces. Zhong Lingyu and I stood by the railing, listening to the discussions from the floor below. Zhong Lingyu's mother came from a merchant family and possessed remarkable business talent. This very tavern was one of her properties. I toyed with the lotus in my hand and said to Zhong Lingyu, "It seems the third prince's men can't wait to make their move." I didn't want Zhong Lingyu to marry the crown prince because I knew she yearned for freedom, and the third prince didn't want Zhong Lingyu to marry the crown prince because, coming from a military family, he didn't want the crown prince to use this opportunity to gain military power. Zhong Lingyu nodded at my words. Those people downstairs only dare to gossip about you, me, and the crown prince, but not a word about your family's state preceptor. That's definitely the style of the third prince's faction in the B. Okay. Once again silenced by the world's rules for a word, Zhong Lingyu couldn't help but roll her eyes under her veil. I looked at Zhong Lingyu and smiled. We should put on another show. After saying that, I walked into the private room Zhong Lingyu had reserved and flipped the table over with a single motion. After practicing dual cultivation with Zhu Yi for a while, my already considerable strength had grown even greater. Within a day, the news of Zhong Lingyu and I crossing paths at the tavern, glaring at each other with mutual disdain, and wrecking our respective private rooms had spread throughout the entire capital. The next day, Changning came to me, saying she was hosting a banquet at her newly built princess residence and invited me to attend. At the same time, Lingyu also received an invitation from Changning. I knew that Changning was acting under the Empress's instructions, hoping to reconcile me and Lingyu, so I gladly agreed. Because this was already part of my plan, I went to the banquet with Lingyu, and then we ended up arguing again over a disagreement. Now, whether it's the common folk or the nobility, whether women confined to the inner chambers or men standing in the court, all will know and be certain that my relationship with Lingyu has deteriorated to the worst possible point. The banquet ended on a sour note, and as I was about to leave the princess's residence, I was stopped on the way by the crown prince. It was to be expected. I looked at the crown prince before me, waiting for him to speak. Seeing the lingering anger on my face, the crown prince softened his voice and said to me, "Ah Zhao, since you dislike Miss Zhong, I will marry another daughter of a military family instead." Although I had expected the crown prince to say this, hearing it with my own ears still made me feel somewhat disgusted. In the eyes of the crown prince, women are merely objects, tools, and I am his most valuable tool. However, those who crave power, engage in politics, and seek the throne have black hearts. I, too, am using the crown prince, and it's equally repulsive. Seeing that I remained silent, the crown prince added, "Ah Zhao, I don't want you to be unhappy." He spoke with deep affection, having believed the newly spread rumors from the third prince's faction outside, thinking that I still had feelings for him and wanting to rekindle our past romance. I didn't respond to the crown prince's words. Calculating the time, a few seconds later, I lifted my gaze to look into the distance. Sure enough, I saw Zhuye. Zhuye was dressed in a magnificent blue robe with silver embroidery on wide sleeves, in the same color scheme as my own attire. I saw through Zhuye's little scheme at a glance, and had to restrain myself to keep from smiling. I walked past the crown prince indifferently, moving to Zhu Yi's side and leaving shoulder to shoulder with him. Behind us, the crown prince's gaze turned icy. Zhu Yi described the look in the crown prince's eyes to me. I laughed. Don't mind him. In my previous life, I always wanted to keep Zhu Yi out of my struggle for the throne, but the consequence was that Zhu Yi sacrificed himself for me. I don't want such a tragic ending to repeat itself, so in this life, I invited Zhu Yi to join me and help me early on. In my previous life, I was too stubborn, too sentimental, and too burdened by worries. In this life, with Zhu Yi's help, many things have become much easier. I use the various small animals and Lingyu, whom Zhu Yi helps me hypnotize, to pass messages, which is very discreet and I don't have to worry about being discovered. I also handed over the leverage that Lingyu wrote to me about her scumbag father and scumbag half-brother to the people of the third prince's faction. The third prince's faction, unaware that the crown prince had decided not to marry Lingyu, began targeting Lingyu's scumbag father and half-brother in court, aiming to undermine the crown prince. Lingyu's scumbag father was extremely greedy for wealth, so these people accused him of embezzling others' property and hinted that he had stolen military funds, frightening him into immediately going to the emperor to plead guilty. Lingyu's scumbag half-brother had a violent nature, showed disrespect to his legal mother, beat and killed servants in the household, and even rounded up tenant farmers to hunt them as prey. Such horrifying deeds were also reported directly to the emperor. The emperor was furious, stripped Lingyu's scumbag father of his general position, imprisoned him, and prepared to exile him to Lingnan. Lingyu's scumbag half-brother was even directly sentenced to death. Lingyu's mother took the divorce agreement to the prison to visit her husband, demanding that he sign it. If he refused, she threatened to accuse him of favoring his concubine and neglecting his wife. Lingyu's scumbag father had lost his only son, was demoted to a commoner, and faced imminent exile. In just a few days, he had aged beyond recognition. I can't take any more trouble, so I had no choice but to agree. Lingyu was overjoyed and invited me to drink together in the mountains outside the city. My father, that scum, has finally fallen from power. He's a complete disgrace to humanity, a purely utilitarian man. For money, he married my mother, then looked down on her merchant family background, mistreated her in every way, and even favored his concubine over his wife. I came to you back then because I wanted my mom to get rid of that scumbag and live a good life as soon as possible. If my mom were in my era, she would totally be a strong woman, the kind who could make it onto the rich list. As for that scumbag brother of mine, needless to say, he was spoiled rotten by my sexist dad. He doesn't value human life and even bullied me and my mom. Zhong Lingyu was drunk, leaning on my shoulder and rambling non-stop. I patted her, playing along as a listener, chiming in with a word every now and then. I know that Lingyu's arrival in my world has brought her much inner suffering. In her previous life, she told me more than once that she wished to return to her original world with her mother. That world upholds the principle of equality for all, where women can break free from the control of paternal and marital authority to live their own lives. When I asked if she had ever considered promoting equality for all in this world, she smiled at me and said, "Not at all, not at all. If I really did that, it would be like shaking the very foundation of your power. You, who value power above all else, would probably want to kill me." I nodded and went along with her words. "Just want to kill you, not actually kill you." She pretended to be frightened, exaggeratedly shivered, then sighed and became serious. This world doesn't even have the imperial examination system. Official appointments are still based on family background and reputation. There's simply no foundation for promoting equality for all. It will take at least several hundred more years. The feudal dynasty is only halfway through its development, and this world still has descendants of serpent gods. Equality between immortals and mortals is destined to be difficult. All I can do is carry this idea on my back and spread it as much as possible, hoping to inspire the poorest and most pitiful common people to find the courage to rise from the mud. Beyond that, I can do nothing more. Lingyu sighed deeply, filled with melancholy by the end. I never told her that I have always admired her deeply. I wanted to become emperor, mostly for my own sake, but she wanted to support me in becoming emperor, more for the sake of the oppressed. How fortunate I am to have met Lingyu. Returning to the Grand Preceptor's residence, it was already dusk. The setting sun was infinitely beautiful, and Zhuyi sat in the light, yet he was more dazzling than the light itself, drunk and overwhelmed. I threw myself directly into his arms. Zhuyi held me, smelling the strong scent of alcohol on me, with a mix of helplessness and affection. "How did you end up so drunk?" Zhuyi gave me some sobering soup. And seeing that I had no other discomfort, he carried me to take a bath, wanting me to sleep early. My mind was still a bit hazy, and in the bathtub, I clung to Zhuyi, not letting him leave. I want to take a romantic bath with him. A few days ago, I had my period, so when we were intimate at night, we used our hands. I've been craving it for a while. The next morning when I woke up, I didn't have a hangover. But it was probably because I had been exposed to the cold wind on the mountain with Zhong Lingyu for too long yesterday, and I caught a chill, so I started coughing. It seems this happened in my previous life too. That time I was much more seriously ill than this time. So during the day, various brewed medicinal soups would always appear on the desk. At night when I have a fever, a hand will also cover my forehead. I didn't see the face, nor did I hear the voice, but I knew it was Zhuye. Even though we haven't spoken for a long time and have grown extremely distant, he still comes to take care of me when I'm sick. How can one remain unmoved? Looking back now, I realize that my feelings for Zhuyi in my past life began that very night. The love in the smallest details is hard to notice, but once noticed, it touches the heart the most. And in this lifetime, I watch as Zhuyi's hand rests on my wrist. "Do you also know medicine?" Zhuyi glanced at me. "No. But my ability to revive the dead has never relied on medical skill, it's divine power." Me, it seems I was truly delirious from illness to ask such a foolish question. After saying this, Zhuye channeled divine power into my body through my wrist. My illness was instantly cured without any medicine. I should be happy, yet I can't help but think of my past life. Back then, Zhuyi didn't grant me divine power because he was already severely weakened by the backlash of the marriage pact. Right, at this thought, my heart aches uncontrollably. I turn over. pinning Zhu Yi down on the bed, and kiss him. Let's do it a few more times, to make up for all we missed in our past life. In the afternoon, I got out of bed and wrote to Lingyu, asking about her health. I remember in my past life, when I fell ill, she also got sick. This time, it seems she won't be able to avoid it either. Sure enough, Lingyu wrote back saying she was feeling dizzy, coughing, and had a sore throat. She really wished she had a cold pill. I didn't know what a cold pill was, but I figured it must be something that could cure her, so I decided to become her cold pill. In the dead of night, with the help of candle night, I avoided all eyes and ears and slipped into Lingyu's room. The general's mansion had been reclaimed, and Lingyu now lived with her mother in a newly purchased residence. Lingyu was startled to see me. How did you get here? I placed my hand on her wrist. I'll treat your illness. I'm not as skilled as Zhu Yi. I spent the whole day learning from him today, and even with the skills I've cultivated before, I can't make Zhong Lingyu recover in a second, but I can alleviate the pain of her illness and help her get better sooner. Lingyu looked at me with envy. If only I had divine powers too. When I was a child watching TV dramas, I was always so envious of the fairies in them. I could relate to Zhong Lingyu's thoughts. Although I didn't know what TV dramas were, in my past life, I had also coveted Zhu Yi's divine powers. I withdrew my hand and prepared to leave. Zhu Yi is still waiting for me outside. Zhong Lingyu looked at me and exclaimed dramatically, "Help! Now I'm even more envious of you. I'm still single." I glanced at her and mercilessly exposed her pretense. What are you envious of? You're clearly a non-maritalist. In my past life, she always told me how great being single was. And what annoyed her the most was her mother pressuring her to get married. She said that in her original world, there were plenty of women who hadn't married by 26, but in this world, she had practically become the number one oddball under heaven. Zhong Lingyu subconsciously laughed at my words, then froze. Hey, how did you know I'm a marriage-free advocate? Realizing I'd spoken out of turn, I pretended not to hear and walked away directly. Behind me, Zhong Lingyu watched my receding figure and sighed softly. I hope you and Zhuye can have a happy ending, not like in the book, where it's just endless suffering, tormenting each other until no one survives in the end. But in this lifetime, many things are different from what was recorded in the book. You'll definitely live a good life. After saying this, Zhong Lingyu couldn't help but curse the heavens under his breath. What's going on? I'm just talking to myself, and you're muting me too. Outside the courtyard gate, Zhuye's ears twitched almost imperceptibly. His face was hidden in the night, indistinct and shadowy. After Zhong Lingyu recovered from her illness, she and her mother left the capital under my arrangements. Officially, it was a return to the northern hometown to worship ancestors. But in reality, only Zhong Lingyu's mother would head north to manage business and make money on my behalf. As for Zhong Lingyu herself, she would go south to the fiefdom where Zhu Yi resided, to produce epoch-making weapons like cannons for me. Zhu Yi, as the state preceptor, held a fiefdom near the Dragon's Rising land. Back then, the announcement of this fiefdom's location directly shook the entire court. A group of ministers jointly submitted a petition, urging the emperor to choose another location as the fief for the Grand Preceptor. They believed that the Dragon's Rise land held extraordinary political significance, and even someone as esteemed as the Grand Preceptor should not be granted it as a fief. But the emperor insisted on having his way and ultimately selected the Dragon's Rise land, though not near the central area. In my previous life, I had also been puzzled by this. Only later did I realize that all of this was not a royal favor, but a royal scheme. Within the Dragon's Rise, there lies a massive confinement array. It restrains Zhuye, preventing him from hypnotizing members of the royal family and even more so from killing them. In my past life, I once visited Zhuye's fiefdom. It was less of a fiefdom and more of a forbidden land, heavily guarded and utterly desolate, where only direct descendants of the royal family were permitted to enter. But it has mountains and water, and the area is vast, making it perfect for hiding to train troops and conduct research. Zhong Lingyu is not a direct descendant of the royal family, but with Zhu Yi's help, it was easy to open another passage for her in the formation. At this moment, I looked at Zhong Lingyu's mother. Next February, the weather will be abnormal, with continuous heavy snowstorms sweeping the north, causing a snow disaster that will affect the capital. On your way north, you can stock up on more grain and charcoal. Zhong Lingyu turned to me in surprise, placed a hand on my shoulder, and pulled me aside. Who exactly is that time traveler friend of yours? How could they be even more meticulous than me, digging out even the snow disaster, a plot point that was only briefly mentioned in the book, and telling you about it? I laughed. You'll find out later. After seeing Zhong Lingyu and her mother off, I rode back to the city on horseback. Upon returning, I happened to witness Shen Jinghui forcibly abducting a young woman on the street. I frowned and immediately lashed out with my whip. Shen Jinghui saw it was me and dared not voice his anger. I glanced at the young woman still being held by Shen Jinghui and said coldly, "Let go." Shen Jinghui recalled the incident in the palace last time and reluctantly let go of his hand. I scooped up the young girl and sat her in front of me, asking where her home was. The girl timidly gave a location, and I rode off with her on horseback. Shen Jinghui watched my retreating figure, so angry that the veins on his forehead bulged. Upon reaching the residence, the young woman dismounted and was about to kneel and kowtow to express her gratitude. I stopped her, saying no need, then turned the reins and left. In the days that followed, I became increasingly busy. Due to the recent incident with the Zhong family, the third prince's faction and the crown prince's faction grew even more hostile toward each other. I lit this fire and began to pile more firewood into it. The marriage between Chongning and Shen Jinghui hasn't fallen through yet. Hidden behind the scenes, I first sent a pile of evidence of Shen Jinghui's crimes to the third prince's side. Because Shen Jinghui is the empress's nephew, the third prince had long wanted to suppress the marquis's residence where Shen Jinghui belonged. Now that he had the opportunity, he immediately took action with his men. I also informed the crown prince's side about all the actions the third prince had taken against him and Shen Jinghui. Soon, the crown prince's side also made quite a few moves. The two sides went back and forth, fighting fiercely. As their instigator, I was so busy that I didn't get a full night's sleep. Several times I fell asleep at my desk, only to be carefully carried to bed by Zhu Yi. Fortunately, the results were very gratifying, with me passing evidence of crimes to both sides, within just 6 months. A large number of incompetent officials were caught in the crossfire of the two parties' struggles and were ousted one after another, and long before that, I had already selected replacements for these officials. I went to great lengths to discreetly place them in their positions. Among them was the elder brother of the girl I had rescued from Shen Jinghui that day. The girl's brother was actually quite mediocre in ability, but the girl herself was exceptionally intelligent and strategic, helping her brother secure a minor official post and allowing him to thrive within the circle of petty officials. Recognizing her talent, I maneuvered through several operations to bring her under my wing. Before the new year arrived, the struggle between the crown prince's faction and the third prince's faction finally reached a preliminary conclusion. The third prince's faction emerged victorious, with the emperor's favoritism and the backing of the noble consort's family. The day the noble consort was elevated to imperial noble consort marked the defeat of the crown prince and the empress. Shen Jinghui's marriage to Princess Chongning was called off, and the various misdeeds he had committed over the past few years were brought to light one by one in the following months. Shen Jinghui was thrown into the dungeon. When I heard the news, I was practicing archery at the state preceptor's residence. One arrow struck down the target representing Shen Jinghui. With Chongning's marriage called off, and the crown prince and empress suppressed by the third prince and the imperial consort, I was deeply distressed. Feeling somewhat guilty towards her, I arranged a banquet for her, inviting a group of talented scholars and beauties to accompany and amuse her. The effect of the banquet exceeded my expectations. Chongning actually took a liking to a gentle and talented scholar. I had someone investigate him and found no issues. So I allowed Chongning to interact with him freely. On the anniversary of Prince Anand's death, a heavy snowstorm hit the capital. I braved the wind and snow to leave the city and visit his grave to pay my respects, not out of genuine filial piety, but to show the people of the capital that I am filial. The scenes Zhong Lingyu and I acted out earlier had, to some extent, tarnished my reputation. Such is the way of the world. If a man marries but still longs for another woman, people will sigh and call him devoted. If a woman marries a husband but still thinks of other men, the world will call her unfaithful, fickle, and adulterous. Fortunately, I don't care about the reputation these people speak of, but Zhu Yi does. he would hypnotize these people for me, making them unable to speak such words to belittle me again. And in this world, if one wishes to build a good reputation, following the path of filial piety is the best choice, sure enough. After I paid my respects to the Prince of Anan and returned to the city covered in thick snow, the people of the capital praised me greatly, with some even composing poems to extol my filial piety. At that time, I was sitting in the study of the Imperial Preceptor's residence, and upon hearing this news, what came to mind was the Prince of Anan's tomb. His tomb had been swept clean, and expensive offerings of wine, meat, fruits, and vegetables were placed before it. As a child, I yearned for paternal love, but after learning that the Prince of Anan was not my father, I felt neither love nor hatred toward him. Some people, even after nearly 20 years without seeing the Prince of Anan, still cannot let go of him. I couldn't help but shake my head and sigh softly. Empress. After the new year passed, on the night of the Lantern Festival, Juye invited me to go see the Lantern Festival together. I gladly agreed. Brilliant fireworks and lanterns lit up the night as bright as day. Just as I was thoroughly enjoying the stroll, I unexpectedly ran into the Crown Prince. It had been a long time since we last met, and the Crown Prince had grown much thinner, startling at first glance. As we passed by each other, he called out to me, "Ah Jiao, do you still remember this sachet?" He picked up the sachet hanging from his waist and showed it to me. The sachet was a bit ugly. I had made it for him myself during last year's Lantern Festival. This is the only sachet I have ever made in both my lifetimes. Juyi tightened his grip on my hand. I looked up and gazed at the Crown Prince. Too much time has passed, I've long since forgotten. Afterwards, Juyi got jealous and asked me for a sachet. I gave him a hair ribbon. It had a snake pattern I embroidered by hand with gold and silver threads. Far more exquisite and beautiful than the Crown Prince's sachet. I smiled and kissed Juyi. You deserve better. After the Lantern Festival, the weather unexpectedly turned cold again. A snow disaster struck the north, forcing victims to flee south. With some gathering in the capital, I had long been prepared and, with the financial support of Zhong Lingyu's mother, began setting up shelters and distributing porridge. The court had previously confiscated the properties of a large number of officials, and now the national treasury is abundant, with enough funds to purchase grain from the south. As a result, this snow disaster did not lead to as many deaths from cold and starvation as it did in my previous life. On the second day of the porridge distribution, the puppets from the state preceptor's residence, following my orders, brought back a pair of siblings from the northern region. The elder sister, over 20 years old, is a delicate beauty as frail as a willow in the wind, named Liang Shengyan. My younger brother just turned 18, a burly and upright-looking man named Liang Sheng's son. Liang Shengyang was a talented minister, but both his parents died because of the third prince. A few years ago, war broke out in the northern region against foreign tribes. The third prince, greedy for glory, advanced recklessly and suffered a crushing defeat. Afterwards, he pinned the blame on Liang Shengyang's father, an official in the north. Liang Shengyang's mother appealed for her husband's justice and was also killed. In her previous life, Liang Shengyan took the initiative to seek refuge with me for revenge and did many things on my behalf. Unfortunately, her health was extremely poor, and she passed away from illness half a year before I was poisoned, having exhausted all her strength. As for her younger brother, he had already died in this snow disaster long before. While Liang Shengyan was alive, she often spoke to me about her brother, saying he was exceptionally skilled in martial arts, adept at leading troops, and a true military talent. In this life, I arranged for puppets in advance to seek out and protect them, ensuring that Liang Shengyan did not ruin her health, nor did Liang Shengshuan lose his life. Liang Shengyan's health was poor, so I used the spiritual energy I had cultivated over the past 6 months to gradually heal her. He is the future prime minister I have chosen. In this life, he must not die young again. I frequently took Liang Shengyan to various banquets, allowing her to become familiar with the noble families and officials' children in the capital. As a result, just like in the previous life, at a banquet, the third prince fell in love at first sight with Liang Shengyan, who was as delicate and beautiful as the legendary beauty Shizi. Liang Shengyan, being highly perceptive, immediately sensed the third prince's affection. She concealed the fierceness in her eyes, covered her lips with her hand, and said to me with a smile, "Watch how I play him to death. Princess, Liang Shengyan has a grudge against the third prince. In her previous life, the third prince was able to quickly fall from grace under the emperor's favor, largely thanks to her. I couldn't be more at ease with her." Before long, the third prince was so infatuated with Liang Shengyan that he lost all reason, yet Liang Shengyan never even let him touch her hand. If Shen Jinghui was a libertine with a promiscuous nature, then the third prince was a spoiled, arrogant young man. Of course, in front of the emperor, he always pretended to be filial and well-behaved, and now, there is one more person he can pretend to be well-behaved for, and that is Liang Shengyan. That day, Liang Shengyan came to me and told me about the third prince's recent situation. He had a big argument with the imperial consort, saying, "Since father emperor is so devoted to mother consort, why can't he be just as devoted to me?" At this point, Liang Shengyan couldn't help but laugh. This fool, grown so big, still hasn't realized that his father has always been infatuated with the former empress. His mother was merely a substitute stripped of her own identity. Some time later, the third prince broke his leg while trying to save Liang Shengyan. Liang Shengyan wept like a beauty in public during the day, but came to me at night. The beauty's figure is graceful, yet there is a fierce determination in her eyes and brows as she says with a smile, "I have already poisoned the third prince. The imperial consort will likely be unable to resist coming for me. If she tries to have me beaten to death, princess, you must save me." But with the third prince in my grasp, I suspect she won't dare to actually lay a hand on me. Liang Shengyan has the third prince of the capital wrapped around her finger. Liang's son, whom I sent to the Jue fiefdom, is also training troops with blazing intensity. I finally had a moment of leisure to write to Zhong Lingyu, only to learn that she had already built a telescope and cannons. For a time, it seemed like good news was coming from all directions, everywhere, until this day. Changning and I went outside the city to fly a kite. On the way back to the city by carriage, I was stopped. The crown prince lifted the carriage curtain and invited me to board for a chat. I looked at him expressionlessly and refused outright. The crown prince gazed at me and suddenly laughed. "Ah Zhao, like me, is also someone who has lived a second life, isn't he?" My expression changed abruptly. Half an hour later, in an empty courtyard, the crown prince and I sat facing each other. Since stabbing himself, the crown prince's health had never been the same as before. He began to fear both cold and heat. Now that it's already spring, he still wears a heavy cloak. The crown prince, seeing my extremely cold expression, laughed and said, "Ah Zhao, why do you look as if you're facing a formidable enemy?" I glanced at him indifferently. "It's not like facing a great enemy. Don't always imagine things that aren't there. Imagine." The crown prince looked puzzled. I couldn't be bothered to explain to him and asked directly, "When did you get reborn?" "Last night." I frowned. Was last night some special day? It wasn't. Back then, to trade for my rebirth, Zhu Yi sacrificed himself. Yet the crown prince paid no price at all to live again. Why? At this thought, for the first time, I understood and shared Zhong Lingyu's urge to curse the damned heavens. Noticing my distraction, the crown prince waved a hand in front of my face. "Ah Zhao, now I'm really curious. Did you marry Zhuye to help me ascend the throne? To assist the Empress Dowager in becoming the Queen Mother? Or was it for your own selfish reasons? Did you already know that the person who saved you from the snake pit that day was Zhuye? Did you already have..."
Suddenly opened my eyes and followed. In the dark room, the crown prince saw Zhu Yi, and after a moment of surprise, he smiled. "Has the grand preceptor come to mock me, or to untie me?" I advised the grand preceptor to choose the latter. The sudden disappearance of a crown prince from the palace is no small matter. It will surely cause an uproar. Zhao was too impulsive today. She won't be able to handle the aftermath. Outside the dark room, hearing this, I couldn't help but retort in my heart, "The palace is indeed in an uproar, but not because they've lost you, the neglected crown prince. It's because the emperor has been poisoned." Zhu Yi used his divine power to conjure a chair and sat down leisurely in front of the crown prince. "Whether this can be settled is not for you to decide." The crown prince suppressed his smile, looked at Zhu Yi, and suddenly said, "I regret it. If I hadn't suggested that Zhao marry you back then, she would have become my crown princess." Zhu Yi quietly watched the crown prince, his expression cold, but he did not refute. My heart sank. The crown prince looked melancholy and deliberately provoked Zhu Yi. Continuing, Zhao and I grew up together since childhood. Zhu suddenly spoke, interrupting the Crown Prince's reminiscence. If we're really talking about childhood sweethearts, it should be me and her first. What do you mean? The Crown Prince was stunned. I was also stunned. The white moonlight streamed through the narrow window, falling on Zhu Yi's face, making him appear as if cast from ice and snow, yet with an added touch of softness and divinity. Zhu Yi played with the hair ribbon I had given him, gazing at the Crown Prince, and said pensively, "You've lived a second life already. Don't you know that the order of many things can't be judged by just one lifetime?" The Crown Prince's eyes widened in shock. Zhu Yi laughed. "I was already connected with Mingjiao before you were even born. Just because it took me 6 years to break free from the confinement spell, doesn't mean you, the latecomer, get to become the first." The Crown Prince was too shocked to speak. My ears were ringing as well. Before my eyes appeared the wooden carving that Zhu Yi had carved last year. I sat across from Zhu Yi, who looked like a young boy, playing chess. He had human legs, while I had a serpent's tail. Could that have been a memory of Zhu Yi and me from the past? But isn't Zhu Yi the descendant of the serpent god? My mind was a tangled mess. By the time I came to my senses, I had already pushed open the door to the dark room. Both the Crown Prince and Zhu Yi turned to look at me. The Crown Prince was astonished, while Zhu Yi remained composed. Clearly, Zhu Yi had known I was outside from the very beginning. Indeed, with his keen senses, how could he not have noticed? I ignored the Crown Prince, my gaze fixed only on Zhu Yi. There was so much I wanted to say, yet I didn't know where to begin. Zhu Yi stood up, took my hand, and led me outside. I don't know if the Crown Prince had gone mad, wanted to prove that I had feelings for him, or was trying to get my attention. But he suddenly shouted my name. Then, with a wave of his hand, Zhu Yi silenced him. Held in Zhu Yi's arms, I was back in the bedroom in the blink of an eye, sitting on the bed. I was still a bit dazed. Zhu Yi thoughtfully poured me a cup of tea. "Will you ask, or shall I tell?" Holding the tea, I took a sip, sobered up, and looked at Zhu Yi. "Go ahead, I don't even know where to begin." As soon as Zhu Yi spoke, he dropped a bombshell. "The true descendant of the serpent god isn't me, it's you." I nearly choked on my tea. In astonishment, that dream I once had suddenly became clear again. My head ached a little, and I raised my hand to rub my temples. "Zhu Ming. Was that my name in the past?" Candle Knight nodded. I looked at Candle Knight. "Then what is our relationship? Siblings, mother and child?" "Zhu Yi." Candle Knight looked at me speechlessly, as if trying to figure out what was going on in my head. A few seconds later, he shook his head in denial. "No." I immediately breathed a sigh of relief. "That's good to hear," Zhu Yi added. "My name was given by you. The surname Zhu comes from the ancient serpent god who has long vanished from the world, named Zhu Jiuyin, and I have taken your place, becoming the new descendant of the serpent god. I seized the key point, taken my place." Zhu Yi extended his hand, a complex array glowing brilliantly in his palm. "The founding emperor of this dynasty obtained you while you were still in the egg. By comprehending the profound laws flowing on your eggshell, he embarked on the path of immortality. He intended to ascend to the immortal realm. But the passage between the mortal and immortal worlds had changed, allowing only the last living being to pass through. So, he spent 10 years setting up this imprisonment array, confining you, still unhatched, in the land of the dragon's rise, intending to borrow your fortune to nourish the empire he founded. And I am the array spirit born from this imprisonment array. When you hatched, the spiritual energy and laws of heaven and earth converged within the array. Seizing this opportunity, I transformed into human form." Zhu Yi said this, then looked at me and smiled. "So if we really get into the details, you and I were actually born on the exact same year, month, and day." Before I could react, Zhu Yi added, "That bond between us goes way further back than the one you share with the Crown Prince." I stayed silent for a moment, then looked at Zhu Yi and smiled. "I think I smell vinegar." Zhu Yi leaned down and kissed me. "No need to guess, I am indeed jealous." He even boasted to me that you two are childhood sweethearts. But clearly, it's you and I who are. Zhu Yi sat on the bed, holding me in his arms, and continued to recount the past. "We spent 20 years together in the confinement array. I, as the array spirit, couldn't survive outside the array, and you, as a descendant of the serpent god, were also trapped by it. Then one day, you looked at a direct descendant of the royal family who entered the array and said to me that you were tired of the unchanging scenery inside. You wanted to see the outside world and experience the joys and sorrows of humans. I asked you how you planned to do it, and you said exchange lives. We exchanged our fates, drawing down the heavenly tribulation that shattered the formation. You became the new formation spirit. But because you were too weak, You chose to reincarnate as a human before dissipating, seeking a sliver of hope. I smiled, looked up at Juye, and commented on my past self. A clever move. Juye smiled and nodded, saying, "It is indeed a clever way to break the deadlock. But you reincarnated and left, while I became the new descendant of the serpent god, still imprisoned within the formation. Fortunately, the formation was cracked by the heavenly tribulation, and since I was originally a formation spirit, I knew the formation well. It took me 6 years, but I finally broke free from the formation's restraints and found you again. But then the formation developed another problem. I didn't want it to disappear. I was hoping that after you finish this life, you could become a formation spirit again, so we could be together for a long, long time. So I left a wooden puppet body in the capital and returned to the Dragon's Rise land to save the formation. After I finally managed to transform the imprisoning formation into one centered around the formation spirit, I returned to the capital." Juyi said this while holding me tight, his voice tinged with bitterness. "You have fallen in love with the Crown Prince." Me, I couldn't help but feel sorry for Juyi. Then I thought about Juyi from my past life, misfortune upon misfortune. I turned around and embraced Juyi face to face. Just as I was about to speak words of comfort, I suddenly remembered something. Juyi had mentioned living a second life to the Crown Prince earlier. So what about himself? I looked at Juyi, my voice strained. When did you come back to life? Juyi looked at me. That night when you went to treat Zhong Lingyu's cold, I heard him cursing the heavens, and then some memories suddenly surfaced in my mind. What did I say? Juyi repeated Zhong Lingyu's words to me. After hearing it, I understood. It turns out that Juyi and I are the male and female leads in a tragic romance novel. But I hooked my arm around Juyi's neck and kissed him. It's not a tragedy anymore. The next day, I went to Liang Shangyan to get the antidote for the third prince. Giving up on killing the third prince just like that, won't you feel resentful? I asked the swallow on the beam. The swallow on the beam laughs. Making him wish he were dead is also a punishment. I haven't had enough fun yet. I smile and remind her. I have many more state affairs to entrust to you in the future. Just don't let them be delayed. Liang Shangyan's smile deepened. Don't worry. A half-dead man is nowhere near as important as my career as Prime Minister. Xiansha Palace. The Emperor lay on the bed, his face dark and purple, glaring angrily at me and the Imperial Consort. The Imperial Consort was somewhat afraid of the Emperor. Seeing that I did not ask her to stay, she took the antidote and withdrew. The Emperor looked at me, struggling to sit up, black blood trickling from his mouth as he said to me, I truly never expected that a mere woman like you would dare to covet the imperial throne. A hen that crows at dawn will be ridiculed by all under heaven and attacked by the masses. I quietly watched him. In both lifetimes, I had little contact with him. Even though he is the biological father of this body and the ruler of this dynasty, therefore, watching him in pain and anger now, I actually feel nothing. The Emperor, seeing my silence, thought he had intimidated me, and softened his tone to offer earnest advice. Mingzhao, give me the antidote, and I might spare your life. I looked down at the Emperor and couldn't help but ask, do you know what a cannon is? What? I briefly explained the cannon to him, then said slowly under his fearful gaze, anyone who dares to mock me or attack me in numbers will be blasted to death by cannons. The Emperor took a deep breath and, unwilling to give up, began to sow discord between Juyi and me again. Mingzhao, you must have received a great deal of help from the state preceptor to get to where you are today. Right, but a man's heart can change. Today he may support you, but tomorrow he could support another, or prop up a puppet. Becoming the Emperor behind the scenes, you are immortal, and he is a descendant of the serpent god. When the time comes, you will have no way to deal with him. Give me the antidote, and I can tell you how to seize his divine power. I laughed. I suppose the method you're about to suggest for seizing Juye's divine power is to have him willingly offer it to me at the ritual altar in the land of the Dragon's Rise. The Emperor's expression changed. How could you know that? In my previous life, the Crown Prince and the Empress told me exactly that. I looked at the Emperor, no longer having the patience to continue the conversation with him. He didn't even bother to mention that this body of his was actually his daughter, directly presenting the pre-prepared abdication edict. Upon seeing the abdication edict, the Emperor immediately withdrew his hand. I will never sign it. I glanced at him. I've already forged your handwriting and signed for you. Just came to inform you. You should move to another palace due to serious illness and become the retired emperor without real power. After dealing with the Emperor, I also conveniently placed the third prince and the crown prince under house arrest. Each person has their own small mansion. How long they can survive in it depends entirely on their own abilities. After finishing all this, I looked at Juye, resting my chin on my hand and sighing. I've become so merciful now. If it were in my past life, I would have killed them all to eliminate any future troubles. But in this lifetime, with such strong confidence, leaving some hidden troubles as bait to lure out those officials who support me on the surface but secretly try to overthrow me is also a good strategy. When the time comes, by eliminating these scheming officials, it will not only serve as a warning to the court but also conveniently free up a number of positions to fill with the new talents I've cultivated through the Imperial examination system. Juyi saw through my thoughts but played along with a laugh. Too merciful, Your Majesty. Allow me to remind you, the coronation ceremony is tomorrow. You should go to sleep now so you can wake up early tomorrow. Juyi walked over to me, picked me up by the waist, and carried me toward the bedroom. I glanced at the sky. The sun hasn't even set yet, Juyi said with profound meaning. If I wait until after the sun sets to serve Your Majesty, the night will be too short. I fear Your Majesty won't get enough sleep and won't be able to rise early tomorrow morning. My coronation ceremony was entirely arranged by Juyi. It was conducted with great solemnity, and after I ascended the dragon throne, the first imperial decree I issued was to confer the title of Empress upon Juyi. Knight, Juyi, with me in tow, traversed vast distances in an instant, leaving the capital behind for the land where the dragon's rise began. At the altar within the magic array, we knelt once more to pay homage to heaven and earth. I hooked my arm around Juyi's neck and kissed him. Every night from now on will be filled with endless joy.